Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how you can implement server-side session with a React or Flask application. Now, I've got this question asked by a lot of people, how to implement authentication in a React application that is using Flask as its backend API. Now, there are multiple ways to implement authentication, but one of the most popular ways is to use JSON Web Tokens, which a lot of people do prefer. But the thing is, with JSON Web Token, it's very complicated to securely store the token on the client side, because if you actually store it in a cookie or in something like, in local storage, uh, like those tokens can get maliciously hacked using CSR for XSS attacks. And if you actually want to store them securely, you also need to bring in refresh tokens so that you never store the access token on the client side, but instead you store a refresh token, which you can use to get the access token. So it's pretty complicated to use, and that's why I always prefer using server-sided sessions. They're pretty secure and they're also very easy to use. Now let me actually explain how server-side session works. So simply what you do is when you log in, so after logging in, the server will set a cookie on the client called session ID. So server sets cookie called session ID. Now this session ID will refer to the session that you have opened after logging in. So every time you log in, every time you get authenticated on the server side, you open a new authenticated session. So if you have access to that session, you can actually perform authenticated tasks or tasks that require authentication. So the server sets a cookie called session ID, and that cookie will simply refer to the session that you have opened on the server side. Now, every time you make a request, so every time client makes request, server receives that session ID. So the server will receive that session ID. And what this will do is that it'll check on the server side. So what the server will do, the server will check for any session which refers to the session ID. So the session ID that you sent to the server will check if there are any authenticated sessions which are linked to that session ID. So if there is a session with that ID, you're authenticated. So if there is a session on the backend which refers to that ID, well, that means you have a valid session. So you're an authenticated client. So now you can perform authenticated tasks. So that's actually like a very layman's way of explaining how server-side sessions work. So let's actually get working on this. So first, I would actually like to create a very, very simple REST API so that you can actually understand how we can make something like this from scratch. So I want to actually get started by installing Flask and SQL Alchemy over here, because I want to just make a simple CRUD API, maybe just a register and login user thing. And I also want to use Flask decrypt for hashing the passwords here. So we can actually install all of this. So we can do pip install -r requirements. Oh, before I do that, I need to go to the server folder. So pip install -r requirements.txt. Now this is going to install everything. Okay, so now these dependencies have been installed. We can now get working on our Flask app. So I'm just going to switch my virtual env. Okay, and now we're going to from Flask import Flask, and then we can now create an application. And here I also want to actually create a few models here, so I can just do models.py, and then here I want to actually create the DB instance. Import SQL Alchemy, and then DB would be SQL Alchemy here. Now let's create a user class. So this is just going to be a database table here. So db.model, and I want the table name to be users. The ID, I want this to be db.column, and then db.string, and I want this to be like, 32 characters long. Now the thing I'm gonna do is I also want to create a function which is gonna be get UID. Now the way we're going to be using ID here is through using Python UID. So so we can do from UID import UID4. So you can actually do this UID4 dot hex. This is what we can return here. Now this will be a primary key. So primary key equals to true, unique equals to true, default would be this get UID here. So basically, we're not going to be providing the user with an ID. So if we don't provide it, the default value would be get ID. So it's going to run this get ID function here, and this is going to return a new unique ID here. So we have that, and now we can also have an email. So db.column, db.string. Now, as far as I know, emails can be at most 345 characters long, and unique true. So I want this to be a unique email. And then password can be db.column, and I want this to be db.text. Nullable false, because sometimes hashes can get very big, but bcrypt has a limit, but I actually forgot what that is, so I'm just going to leave it on text. But yeah, it's actually best to put it on the limit so that it takes less space on the database. But to be frank, I actually forgot how much space the bcrypt password hashes take. So yeah, we can have this here. So we have this user model here, and we can now import this. So we can do from model import db and then user. And now I can just do db.init app. So we're just going to initialize the application instance, and I also want to do db.create all here. So before I actually do initialize this application, I want to create a config. So in Flask, you can also use app.config, but I always prefer having a separate configuration file, so I can just do class application config, and then I can just have a few stuff. So I can just set SQL alchemy track modifications. I can set it to false so that it stops logging a useless message. And then I also want to echo the SQL. So every time you run a SQL function, I want it to echo what's happening with the database. And now I'm just going to set the database URI. SQL alchemy database URI. And right now I'm just going to be using SQLite here. So I'm just going to be a raw string SQLite. And I want this to be this db.SQLite. So it's going to be a database in the current folder. So it's going to create a file in the current folder, which is fine with me. And I also want to actually create a secret key here. So I'm just going to do .env, and I want to add python.env here. So I can just run this. And here I want to do secret key. I want to do some gibberish here, but make sure you always have a strong secret key, which is hard to crack. So you can have that. And I also want to do this. So at the top of our file, I want to do from .env import load.env, and I want to do load.env here. Maybe I can actually do this over here in the application configuration here. Yeah, we can have it over here. And I also want to have a secret key. So secret key would be import os. So os.environ secret key. Since the .env are actually creating environment variables, I'm just going to use this secret key over here. So we have that, and now we can just run the Flask app. So if __ name equals to __ main app.run debug equals to true. Great. So now we can run this Flask application. So we can do python app.py, and it's going to say no application found. And why is that? Well, we need to load the configuration first. So we can do app.config.from object. So we can do from object, and we can just do from config import application config. So we can just apply this here. And now we can run this. But it's going to say no application found. And why is that? It's going to say db.create all. Okay, so I actually forgot to do something here. So we can do with app.app context. So simply, this is going to create a new app context here. So now I can just do db.create all. Now, the issue I have had here is that there's an application found. So it says either work inside a view function or push an application context. So I actually forgot how contexts work in here. So we can now just run this application and it should actually create this here. So right now it should have created those tables here, but they have not been created yet. So we can just work with routes now. So we can do app.route slash register. So we can just have a simple registration route. So def register user. And I can now import session here. So not session, I can actually import request here. And then we can actually have this. So we can have email will be requests.json email. So I want to get it from the JSON data. The password request.json. This is going to be password. So what I want to do here is, so if user exists, so if a user exists with that email, so I can just do user.query.filter by email equals email dot first is not none. So this will basically return true if you have an existing user. So if user exists on a abort with 409. So there's a conflict here. So I want to abort with a 409. Great. So what I can do here is I can now create a new user. So new user would be a user email equals email. Oh, and before I do that, I need to import Flask bcrypt. So from Flask bcrypt import bcrypt. We have that here, and now I can just do this is gonna be with capitals. So we can just have this bcrypt equals app bcrypt, and this is gonna pass in the app here. So we can do the hashed password. We'll do bcrypt dot generate password hash, and we're just gonna pass in the password here. Now the password will be this hashed password, and now we can just do db.session.add new user, and then db.session.commit. And now I want to return this new user here, so I can do JSONify, and I can just do ID would be the new user dot ID, and then the email. Wait, let me actually go over here. The email would be new user dot email. Great. So we have JSONify here. JSONify. Great. So you can try running this now, and you see this is creating a db.sqlite here automatically, and you see there is this new table here. So this is why I echo my SQL here, SQL Alchemy echo, so that I can see what's actually happening here. So I can open up Postman here. So Postman is a software which you can use to test out your API. So I can now do localhost 5000/register. This is going to be a post request. In the body, I want to have role, and this is going to be JSON data. So I can just set email to be this, and then password to be 12345, just for testing this out. If you send this, it says method not allowed, and that is completely fine because I forgot to add this method. So methods equal post. Now if I run this here, it's gonna return me this thing here. So we have our new user, and if you take a look at this here, we have this SQL here. It's gonna select the user. So basically it's querying the user first, and then it wants to set a user. So insert into users, and then passing in the data here. So this is the hashed password, and we can have this over here. So yeah, we have created a new user. Now, if you try to create a user with that same email, it's gonna throw an error with 409 conflict, which is completely okay. To be honest, I would actually not prefer using 409 conflict. I would rather use something like return JSONify, and then I would use error. So it's gonna be the user. We can say user already exists, and I want to pass in the 409 status code here, so we can remove abort from here. So we can now just run this, and it says user already exists in the headers. So you see the status is 409 conflict because it was conflicting with someone, which is fine. Yeah, we have a registered user here. So now I can just do app.route and then /login. So methods equals to post as well. I want to do def login user, and then the email and password I'm going to take from here. So if, okay, wait, one thing. Okay, yeah. So if not user exists, so simply I'm just checking if the user exists or not. I'm just going to do user. So if user is none, I'm just going to say error unauthorized. Unauthorized, and this is going to be 401, I think. Yeah, this is going to be 401, unauthorized. So now what I'm going to do, if the user does exist, I want to check if bcrypt.check password hash. I'm going to do user.password, and this is going to be password. So if check password hash works, if this works, so sorry, if this doesn't work, we're just going to return unauthorized. Okay, so we're just going to return unauthorized. And if it actually works, I want to actually return this user here. So we're going to do the same thing if this works. Okay, so we're going to have this user.id. So yeah, this is what we're going to have here. Now, if you want to go to login again, so we can do localhost 5000/login. In the body, if we have the same things here, we can have JSON here. If you have that, and if you send this request, it's going to say method not allowed. Because I'm using get requests here, we're going to have post here. And it returns me this as well. So which means I am logged in. But the thing is, even if I actually get this successful login, the server has no way to keep this, session, authenticated session alive. So for this, we are going to use server-sided session. So this will return a cookie to the client. So if we're using server-side sessions here, one thing we need to do is we need to install Flask session, and we also need to install Redis here because we'll be using Redis for our server-side sessions. Now Redis is actually very, very good for key pair value storage and also sessions as well. So I always prefer using Redis. So I can just stop the server here, and then I can just pip install this. Now this is going to install this now. One thing I would like to do is to download Redis. Now, for Windows, there's like an outdated version of Redis, but if you're on Linux, you can actually install Redis very, very easily. Or if you don't want to use this outdated version of Redis for Windows, you can easily just spin up a Docker container, which I usually do, but I've seen that a lot of people don't actually want to use Docker, so for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to download this Redis here. So yeah, I'm just going to download this one here. And I'm just gonna install Redis on Windows. Okay, so we have this. I can just accept the license agreement, add Redis installation, add exception to firewall, set memory limit, nope. And I'm just gonna install Redis here. Great, so we have installed Redis here. And now if you actually go to another terminal, we can do Redis CLI. And you see this here. It's saying that Redis is working perfectly. So if you do ping, it's going to say pong, which means we have Redis working successfully. And if I do Redis CLI again, it works. So we have installed Redis successfully on Windows. So we have our Flask session here, like install. So let's actually create a configuration here. So we can actually go to the Flask session logs. Flask session logs. Sorry, not Flask session logs. We can just do like docs. And yeah, this is documentation. You can use Flask session very, very easily. So we can just enable the session config here. So we can do session type and that's going to be Redis. So we can also have session permanent. So we don't want this session to be permanent. So we're going to have false, and then we can do session use signer. So this is going to use the secret key signer on this to be true. And then the session URL, so session Redis. So we have to point out to our Redis client. So we can do import Redis, and then we can do redis.from URL, and this is going to be Redis, and then the path is going to be localhost 127. To be honest, we can actually do this here. So we can just copy this thing here, so the place where Redis is running, and we can just paste this in here. Easy as that. So yeah, we have that working over here. Now I can go to app.py here, and then I can do from Flask session import session. Then I can just do server session. It's going to be session, and then this is the app. So we have set up our session successfully. Now, the thing I want to do here to actually use that is whenever the user logs in, I want to set the session. I want to put some data inside that session. I want to put some data here so that we know what user this current session refers to. So I want to import this session here. Now, by default, if you don't have server-sided session here, this session will be client-sided session, which is very, very insecure, and guys, don't use this. But since we have enabled server-sided session, this session thing over here will always be stored on the server side. So if you have server-sided session enabled, you can use this, because none of this is going to be stored on the client except the session ID, which is fine. So we're going to set the session user ID, and this is going to be user.id. So simply, I'm just storing some data inside the session. So we have that here. So we're just going to store this here, session user ID. And now if I actually run the app, so python app.py, and now if you log in here, you can check the cookie here, and you see there is this new cookie called session, and this cookie is just a weird looking session ID here. Like, nothing too special. This is just the session ID, so the ID, which refers to the current authenticated session. Now, let's actually implement another route here. Now, I want this route to be the get current user route. So I want this route to be @me. So basically, if you're logged in, this will return info about the current logged in user. So we can just do def get current user, and then I want to have the session. Sorry, I want it to be the user ID. So user ID will be session.get user ID. Now, if there is an invalid session, this will return none. So if not user ID, I am just going to return this here, unauthorized. Oops, my bad. Okay, yeah. So we have the user here. So right now we are logged in here, so we can just do user is going to be user.query.filter by ID equals to user ID dot first. And I just want to return this here. So return JSONify. Yeah, we can just do this here. Okay, yeah, so we have this set up now. Now if you actually go to this, so we can do localhost 5000 / @me, a get request, and if we send this here, you see it's returning us this user. And the way this is working is if we go to cookies, you see this session cookie is automatically being sent. So we have the session cookie here. But if we actually remove this session cookie, and now if you send this request, it's just going to return unauthorized. But if we log in here, so now if you go here, you see you have no cookies here. So if you send this, you're logged in, you see we have a different session ID. If we go to cookies now, we have this session cookie. And now if we try to log in here, sorry, if we try to get the current user, it's just going to return the current user here because we have a session ID here. So this is basically how the authentication system works here. So this is our complete backend. Okay, so now we can actually get started on the front end. So I'm just going to open another terminal here, and then I'm just going to do create React app. Now, since this is a React tutorial, I hope that you at least know the basics of React. So we're going to create React app, and we're just going to do client and then I'm just going to use TypeScript for this. Now, if you are a JavaScript user, it's fine. You can still do the same thing, but I always prefer using TypeScript because there's like static type checking. So it's actually very helpful, and there are a lot of ways to avoid errors. So yeah, that's the reason I always use TypeScript. Okay, so our React application has finished setting up, so we can just do cd client now, and then I can just run yarn start. So it's now going to start the React application. Okay, so the React application is running here. So now we can actually go to the client side. I can actually remove some stuff from the server side. So go here, we can actually remove some of the stuff like app.css, and then app.test.tsx, logo.svg, then setup web vitals, setup tests. Yeah, I don't need any of that, to be honest. So I can just remove some useless stuff from here, like this here, and then just have a div. So yeah, now if we go to this page here, we have nothing here, which is fine. So I want to have a React router set up here. So we can just do yarn add React router DOM. So this should be adding the React router DOM library. So I can just create a router.tsx, and then I can just use a snippet library. So I usually use the ES6 React Redux snippet, so React snippet here. So yeah, I use this extension here, just like 3 million downloads, which is amazing. Yeah, we have this, and I also want to add the types for this. Only do this if you're using TypeScript. So type slash React router DOM. So I also want to do import browser router from React router DOM, and then I also want to do switch as well, and I also want to do route. Great. So I want to have the browser router wrapping all of this. Inside the router, we are just going to have a switch, and inside the switch, I'm going to have a route. And then this route will take a few props here. Now, what props does it actually take here? This takes the route props, and this is going to take the location and the component. So we're just going to have the location, which will be slash. So this is going to be the location exact. I think is this the, oh sorry, this is not going to be location, this is going to be path exact. And then I want the component to be landing page. Okay, so I want this to be just the landing page here. So this is fine. I can just do yarn start now. Now I want to create this landing page component here. So we can just have this page here. We can go to src. We can have pages, and I can just remove this app.tsx here. And instead, I want to have this landing page.tsx. Now rfce. So we have this react.fc. So we're gonna have this here, and then so we can just import this here. Great. And in the router, I'm just gonna copy this router and put it here. Great. So we have this here. So in the landing page, I'm just going to have a few stuff here. So inside here, I'm just gonna be doing h1, and then welcome to this React application. I'm just going to have this simple thing here. So welcome to this React application, and I don't actually want to bother using some like styling here, doing CSS. I don't want to bother with that. So yeah, we're just gonna have this welcome to this React application, and I also want to break a line and then just say that you are not logged in. This is gonna say this here. Okay, so it's gonna say that, or we can have it like this. Yes, that's great. And then I'm just gonna have a button here, so I can do login, and then another button that's gonna say register. We're gonna have two buttons here, so it's gonna say login and it's gonna say register. I can just have some spacing between this, so I can just have class name buttons button span. I'm just gonna call this button span here. in the CSS, I'm just going to do dot button span space, or sorry, we can just have padding. It's going to be like something like 10px or something like that. We can just have like what yeah, we can just have padding here. I actually want to add some space here. We're just not going to do button, and then it's going to do this. So we're going to have some margin here, about like what 5px or something like that. We can just remove this div thing here. So yeah, we're going to have that here. And then we're also going to have some padding. So padding is going to be 5px as well. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look that bad for some minimal styling. So we have this, and I'll want this to redirect to the I want this to redirect to /login, and I want this to redirect to /register. Okay, so we're gonna have this, and I also want to have this here. So I'm just gonna do route component, and then I want to have a 404 component, so we can just do 404.tsx rfce, and then oh sorry, I'm just gonna do not found.tsx. We're going to do not found. I messed up the variable naming convention thing. This is going to be a react.fc, and then we're just going to say h1 for not found. So we're going to have this not found page. Fine, and if we type something like this here, it's going to say 404 not found. Great, so we have this, and now we can actually go to the landing page here. So we can actually go to the login page, but now it's going to say 404 not found because we haven't added a login route. So we can now create a login page here. So we can do login page.tsx. And then here it's just going to be a react.fc. I'll just type everything. So yeah, so we have this login page here. I want to add this to the router. So we can just do route, then path would be /login exact, and then the component would be this login page. So we can just import this here. Great. So you have this login page here, which doesn't actually include anything yet. So we are going to have a few things here. First, I want to create two state variables. So we can just have uState. And these two state variables are going to be the const email set email. It's going to be use state. And this is going to be a string. So this is going to be a string, which will be, or we're just going to have null here. Yeah, we're just going to have null here. So we can just do string or null. We can have these two things here. So, and this is going to be the password. And then I'm going to have set password. Okay, yeah, so we have these two variables here. And here I want to have this h1 here. It's going to be log into your account. Or let's just have this here. Log into your account. And then we're going to have this form here, which will not have an action, but we're going to have an input here. Input type text. And then I want to have this value here. The value will be email. And then on change, I want to have this set email would be I want this to be like this. So set email target.value, and this will also be yeah, I want this to be a string. I think, yeah, it's gonna be a string. Yeah, we need to also set that as well if that's the case, because it's gonna be a drag to actually check that out. Okay, so we're gonna have this. We have this input field here. I'm gonna have a label here. So label /label email, and I want to add some spacing here. We have that. I'm gonna put this in a div for better organization. just have a password here. And I want this to be set password, password here. And this will be a password input. Okay, so we have this here. We can now just enter an email. You can also enter a password here. So one thing I want to actually do here is I'm going to take the input. So input, font size 18px. Because right now this is very, very small for my eyes. Label, font size 20px or something like that. Yeah, I mean, this does look fine. So we can just do, we can do margin left 5px. Just to move it a bit over here. Right, okay. So what I'm going to do is I have my email here. And then I can also have some weird password here. Okay, so great. We have all of this set up here. So now what I want to do here is when I hit this submit button here, so I want to have a button and I want to have a submit button here. And on click, so on click, I want to run the login user. Now this is going to be a function that I'm going to write right now. So it's going to take the event, but I really don't want to worry about the event here. So what will this actually do here? It's going to have a, you know what? I'm not going to actually bother doing that because I really don't want to worry about the types here. But yeah, I can just do login user here. Like this. Great. And I want to do console.log email password. So you can have this here. Now, if I open up the console here, if I type in my email, and then if I type this here, it's gonna say this. But I want to actually do button type button. Yeah, so I actually want to do this here. So by default, any button in the form would be a it would be a submit button. So we're just gonna have this here, and what I want to do is I want to make an API request with this. So let's actually install Axios. So so we can do yarn at Axios, and Axios is like a library that I really, really like to use with React. So we can just do http client.ts, and I want to do import Axios from Axios, and then yeah. And then I want to export default, and then Axios dot HTTP client. Or what was that actually? Wait 1 second. So Axios dot create, and then I want to be use with credentials. I want this to be true so that it sends all of the cookies here. So yeah, I'm gonna have that, and I also want to import this. So import HTTP client from /HTTP client. Great, we're gonna have this, and I also want to run the React application over here. I don't know why it opens Firefox every time. I think I've set it as my default browser. Okay, so we have this. Now what I want to do is I want to make an HTTP request to the API. So our API is running on localhost 5000. So what I'm gonna do is I want this to be an async function. And I want to do const response is going to be HTTP client dot host. And then I want this to be localhost 5000 / login. And the data, I want this to be a email or something like you know, email password. We're just gonna have this, and then console.log rest.data. Yeah. Oh, we need to await this first. Yeah, my bad. So we're just gonna do that. And if we try to put the email here and then the password. If we submit this, it's going to say that has been blocked by the course policy. Now, the way we solve that is we have to go to our Flask server here, and we need to enable course. So we can go here, and then we can do requirements.txt, and then we can do Flask course. Now I can do pip install -r requirements.txt. It's going to install Flask course here, and then we can do something like from Flask course import course. And then we have this course is going to be app. And now if we run the server here, there we got this working over here. And now if you submit this, it's still going to say has been by the course policy. It must be true. And why is that? It should be working completely fine here. As far as I know, it shouldn't have any issues here. If I actually go here, it's still giving this issue here. And why is that? If you go to network here, if you go to this request, it's not returning any data here. So the response is not replying with any headers. Oh yeah, we need to input cross origin, so we need to do this. At cross origin, we can have this here, and then this, and then this here. Now we should be able to do that. Yeah. So if we actually take a look at the console right now, wait 1 second. So if we refresh this, and it still says from this origin has been blocked by course false response to must be true when the request mode is credential. Oh yeah, wait, I forgot. I need to enable allow credentials, so we can just do allow credentials, I think. So there are a few query parameters here. We want to enable credentials. So for enabling credentials here, we can do support credentials is going to be true. This is the thing we didn't supply here. So we can just remove this cross origin thing here and go to React. And you see this is now returning us this data here. And if you go to that network tab here, you see in the headers, it's returning a set cookie here. If you go to cookies, you see there is this response cookie, which is setting this session here. So we have this session cookie here, which is awesome. So we can now go to our homepage here. And what I'm going to do is here, so we have our login page, which is working perfectly. So I want this to be redirecting to the if rest.status equals to 200. Oh, I forgot this is JavaScript, not Python. Yeah, my bad. I want to just do window.location.href slash. But what if we enter a wrong password here? If we go to the login page, if we enter some weird looking thing here, and if we enter a useless password, it's just going to say 401 unauthorized. So we can do this. Else if rest.status equals to 401 console.log invalid credentials. I just want to try this out. So if you send this here, it should say invalid credentials here. So we have this here, access.post. Now I want to actually do this. I'm gonna have a try here. So I want to have try. And then I want to have a hatch. And here, I want to console.log the thing here. We want to console.log the exception here. And it says the request has failed with this here. Okay, so one thing we can do here to solve this, I've actually figured it out, is we can actually take this error here, and then we can just do, so to get the response here, or the status code, error.response.status. So we can have error.response.status here, so we can do if error.response.status is equals to 401. We're just gonna alert with invalid credentials. So we can just do that. So if we submit this and we have like invalid credentials, we're just gonna alert this here. But if we have proper credentials here, so we have a proper password, we're just gonna have this. Now, what I want to do here is I want to do window.h location.href, and I want this to redirect to the home page. So if we submit this and if it works, it's gonna return us to the home page. Now, what I want to do here on the home page is I want to actually try to get the current user's information. So I want to have a use state and a use effect here. So I want to have the const user set user and then use state. And I also want to create a user type here. So we can just do types.ts and we can do export const user, and then the ID would be a string. Oh yeah, sorry. We had to have export interface user. And then we have the email, which is a string as well. We have that here. So we have user here, and then we can import, we can actually import this from types, and we can just do null. Yeah, we can actually import this here. And I also want to have this use effect here. So use effect. And then we can actually have this, and I want to create an async lambda function here. So we can create this here side here. So we can just do HTTP client .get, and then we can do / localhost 5000 /adme, and then I want the const resp to be await here. So we're gonna have that, and we are going to do set user would be resp.data if this is successful. But if there is an error here, so we can just do try, and then we can also catch the exception. We can just console.log not authenticated. We can do that here. And what we can do here is we can have a ternary here. So we can just do user not equal to null. So we can actually return this here, or we can return this, and I also want it to be h1. So I want this to be in a div here. The div /div. Yes, so we're gonna have this here. So we can just say logged in. Simply what I'm doing is that if the user is not equals to null, so if the user is logged in, we're just gonna say logged in, or if they're not logged in, we're just gonna do this. So you see here, over here, the user's logged in, and I forgot to fix this here in the use effect. We need to set this dependency array here, or else your thing is gonna get spammed with requests. You see here. So yeah, if we refresh this, you see it's gonna say logged in. Now that's basically how this works. So if we can actually put some stuff here, logged in. We can just say something like h2 logged in here. So it's gonna be h2, and we can have this email here. So we can just do email. We can just have a h3 here. It's just gonna say email, and then it's gonna have user.email. I want this to be a div here. So a div, and then the password. Oh, sorry, not password. I'm just gonna have the ID. I'm gonna do user.id. So yeah, we have this here. So we're now currently logged in. I also want to have a logout thing. So we can just do something like we have a button here which is gonna log us out. So we can just do logout. And I want to create a logout route soon. So yeah, we have this over here, and I also want to actually create a registration route. So right now our login route is working fine. So let's actually create a logout route. So we can just do logout page.tsx. Or maybe instead of creating a component, I want to just have this logout, a function that logs you out. So on click, we can just do logout user. So yeah, this might work. So we can do const logout user async, and we can actually do something like this. So we can do HTTP client.post. So we can actually do that. So we can do const resp is gonna be logging you out. So we can do logout, and then we're just gonna window.location.href. So simply we're just gonna refresh the page. Or we can just do window dot refresh. Is that a method here? We can actually just do this here. Yeah, that's gonna be fine. So we can do that, but right now in our app.py we need to create a new route for this. So we can just do app.route slash logout, and then the methods, it's gonna be post, and then logout user. Now I want to do session.pop user ID, and then we're just gonna return 200. That's simply what we're gonna do here. And did I mess something up here? Yep, I did mess something up. Great. Okay, so yeah, this works now. We can now click logout, and it says there's a block by this here. Is there an issue here? The function is, oh yeah. So this is not actually a course issue. This is more like a I just want to return the status 200 code here. So you can do logout, and boom, it says you're not logged in. So if we can go to login here, I can just type the email. I can type this, and it says I'm logged in. So we're now logged in here. And you see it's making SQL queries here, which is great, and I can log out. Now let's actually create a registration route. Okay, so we can actually create a registration route here. And in the server-sided thing here, I also want to set the session ID, because in most like popular website, you actually get logged in once you register. So I want to actually do that. So we can do new user.id here. Now we can actually copy this login page here. And I want to have a register page.tsx. Now I can just do register page. Same thing here. Great. So we can have this, and then we can do register user. I want to do this, so we can do register. And I can do create an account. I can do register user. Okay, boom. So we have that, and now we can go to the router here. So we can go to router, we can just register, we can do register page. Great. I can register here, create an account. I can just make another email, so I can just say bob at bob.bob. So it's a really, really nice email. I can just do bob as the password here and click submit. And now it's going to log in us, redirect us, and here is us logged in. So it says logged in. This is Bob's user ID, and this is the email, bob at bob.bob. And now if you log out, it's gonna say you're not logged in. I can also log in with Bob's email, so Bob. Yeah, it's just the password is just Bob. So we can now submit this, and boom, it says we're now logged in as Bob here. So yeah, that is basically how you make a React application that authenticates with Flask through server-side session. So that's it for this video. If this video helped you out, please consider subscribing to the channel and like this video. I really put a lot of effort into my content, and I would appreciate it if you guys subscribe. So anyways, have a good one, guys. Peace out.